Welcome back to the Below Average Joe's MMA show. This is not a preview. This is not a recap. This is not my thoughts and opinions on breaking MMA news or fight announcements. But instead, this is the start of a new monthly series which will be titled The State of the UFC. Now, this is not to be confused with the old podcast series that Noah and I did on this channel. They are still on here if you want to go give those a taste, go back in time, if you will. But the name of this series is in homage of those few episodes that Noah and I did. Basically, the plan for this State of the UFC video series is following every monthly UFC pay-per-view. I will upload a video where we break down everything that happened in that month time frame. So for example, this video will consist of UFC Vegas 91 and then UFC 301. Those events both happened after UFC 300. Then the next video would come out after UFC 302 and discuss UFC St. Louis, UFC Fight Night Barboza versus Murphy, and then UFC 302 Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. I'm basically just going to break down the numbers of what happened on the cards, finishes, number of fights, etc. Go through the ranked fighters that fought and won or that fought and lost and how that affected the rankings of their respective divisions after the card. And then at the end, I will go over the pound for pound rankings after every pay-per-view, talk about the big debutantes from each period of time that these videos cover, and then discuss and mention what will be next in the next video. So hopefully you understand after that breakdown what is going to be going on here. So without further ado, intro is concluded. Let's get into this and break down the numbers. First, from UFC Vegas 91, which was headlined by Matheus Nicolau and Alex Perez. And then we will get into UFC 301, where we just saw Alexandre Pantoja defend his flyweight title. So UFC Vegas 91 went down at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. It was the 91st event in the Apex, so that's at least convenient. Well, the 91st fight night event in the Apex. We've had a couple pay-per-views there as well throughout the pandemic era. We saw 13 fights with 5 KO TKOs, 2 submissions, and 6 decisions. That is 7 finishes, 6 decisions total. We saw 2 fights go down in the heavyweight division, 1 at light heavyweight, 1 at welterweight, 3 at lightweight, 1 at featherweight, 1 at bantamweight, 1 at flyweight. And then for the women, we saw 2 flyweight fights and 1 strawweight fight. So that's the number breakdown. Let's get into the ranked fighters that competed on the card and how the results affected the rankings. Now, the rankings you're about to see here as I break it down are not as they stand when this video is coming out. So I'm going to show you the rankings from immediately after this card, and then we get to UFC 301, you'll see the rankings immediately after that card and what they will be present day when this video comes out. So in the light heavyweight division, we saw the number 11 ranked Ryan Spann lose to the unranked Bogdan Guskov via TKO in the second round, 3 minutes and 16 seconds in. Bogdan made that 2 straight wins by finish by beating Ryan Spann, and he inserted himself into the top 15 at light heavyweight. He went from unranked to number 12 at 205 pounds, while Ryan Spann dropped from number 11 to number 15 as a result of this loss. And then someone else that was impacted by this result without even having to compete on this card, which is what's going to be cool to see throughout these breakdowns, is the other people that were affected without even having to compete. That was the number 12 ranked Alonzo Minifield. He went up from number 12 to number 11 and took Ryan Spann's spot. Then we'll go to the flyweight division, the flyweight main event, where the number 5 ranked Matheus Nicolau was knocked out in the second round by the number 8 ranked Alex Perez, 2 minutes and 16 seconds in. We saw Matheus Nicolau drop from number 5 to number 8, and we saw Alex Perez rise from number 8 to number 5. So those two just flipped spots, but there were 2 other fighters that were affected by this result. The number 7 ranked Muhammad Mokaev, who had just beaten Alex Perez the month before in March, went from number 7 to number 6, and we saw the number 6 ranked Manel Kopp fall back to number 7. So Kopp and Makhachev flip spots, and so do Nico Lau and Perez. Perez is officially a top 5 fighter in the flyweight division. And then the only other fight on this card that featured a ranked fighter or ranked fighters was the number 12 ranked Ariane Lipski versus the number 13 ranked Karine Silva. This was at the women's flyweight division, and we saw Karine Silva get a unanimous decision victory and remain undefeated in the UFC. And as you could guess, this was a pretty clean transition. Karine goes from 13 to 12, and Ariane Lipski goes from number 12 to number 13. So simple, straight to the point. We go through the numbers, we go through the stats and what happened with the rankings, and then we move to the next card. Now, as this series continues to progress, I may find other things to throw in here to add some more details, but for now, that'll be it for UFC Vegas 91. We will go to UFC 301 next. UFC 301, headlined by Alexandre Pantoja, the flyweight champion of the world, and the number 10 ranked at the time, Steve Erceg, headlined this pay-per-view in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, in the Farmácia Arena, a fight card that featured 13 total bouts, much like UFC Vegas 91. In this card, we saw the reverse: 6 finishes, 7 decisions. Of those 6 finishes, 4 were knockouts and 2 were submissions. We saw 1 fight at light heavyweight, 2 at middleweight, 4 at lightweight, 1 at featherweight, 1 at bantamweight, and 2 in the flyweight division. And for the women, we saw 1 flyweight fight and 1 strawweight fight. Now for this card, we saw 5 of the 13 fights feature at least 1 ranked fighter, and as a result, there is a lot of stuff to discuss here in the movement of all of these divisions. We start with the main event, the flyweight division. Alexandre Pantoja defends his title for the second time at 125 pounds by beating Steve Erceg via unanimous decision. Steve Erceg, however, did move up in the rankings. It was a very, very competitive fight. If you haven't seen my breakdown and recap of it, feel free to go check that out on the channel. Erceg gave Pantoja all that he could handle, and on 2 judges' scorecards was 1 round shy of winning, and in round number 5, is where he made the mistake. So I look for Erceg to get back in there again in the future and challenge for the title. But for now, the championship is still around the waist of Pantoja. Erceg did move from number 10 to number 9. I feel like with this type of performance, he could have climbed even higher, maybe even close to top 5 territory. But maybe with all the movement that we had seen in the week prior, they decided to hold him at number 9. And then as a result, Tim Elliott, who was number 9, dropped to number 10. So those 2 guys just flip spots. Pantoja obviously remains and still as the champion. And we'll also talk about him in the end because he is on the pound for pound list right now. We move up 10 pounds to the bantamweight division where Jose Aldo came out of retirement after a year and a half away and beat the number 12 ranked Jonathan Martinez via unanimous decision. And oh boy, did this send the bantamweight rankings into a tizzy. First and foremost, we saw the unranked and retired Jose Aldo enter the top 15 and entered the top 10. He debuts at the number 8 ranked spot in the bantamweight division. Jonathan Martinez, who was number 12, dropped to number 14, so he loses 2 spots in the back half of the rankings. And then as a result of Jose jumping in so many spots and Jonathan losing 2 spots, 4 other names got maneuvered. Number 8 ranked Rob Font dropped to number 9. The number 9 ranked Umar Nurmagomedov dropped to number 10, who just got scheduled for a main event in Abu Dhabi against Corey Sandhagen going down in August. We saw the number 10 ranked Kyler Phillips drop to number 11, and we saw the number 11 ranked Dominic Cruz drop to number 12. So kind of just a recoil effect from that result. It sends everybody down. Jose was the biggest climber in all of the UFC 301 card, and after that performance and the story of his career, rightfully so. In the light heavyweight division, we saw the former title challenger Anthony Smith submit the undefeated, unranked Vitor Petrino in the first round with a guillotine submission 2 minutes on the dot into the first round. I guess I said first round twice. There's a third time. However, there was absolutely zero movement from the week prior with this win by Anthony. So he holds his spot at number 10. We see Bogdan Guskov, who entered the rankings last week, stay at number 12, and Alonzo Minifield stay at number 11. From the light heavyweight division, we move down to the middleweight division where we only saw 1 ranked fight happen, but two fights that had significant impacts on the rankings. We saw the number 13 Paul Craig lose to the number 14 ranked Caio Bahaio in round number 2 via KO 2 minutes and 10 seconds in. As a result, the number 14 ranked Caio Bahaio rose 2 places to number 12, and number 13 Paul Craig dipped out of the rankings, and a lot of other things happened to make that possible. So first and foremost, we saw Michel Pereira, unranked middleweight, take on Ihor Potieria, unranked middleweight. Michel dominated en route to a first-round finish in less than a minute. That was his third straight finish at 185 pounds. He went from unranked to the number 13 ranked spot. So he takes Paul Craig's spot. Caio moves to number 12. And then look at the rest of the movement in the back half of the middleweight ranks. The number 12 ranked Anthony Hernandez traded spots with the victor Caio Bahaio, so he went from 12 to 14. We saw the number 9 ranked Roman Dolidze dip 2 spots to number 11. Number 11 ranked Khamzat Chimaev, funny enough, moved up to number 10, and the number 10 ranked middleweight Jack Hermanson moved up to number 9. So a lot of movement in the bantamweight and middleweight divisions following UFC 301. And last but not least, we go to the women's strawweight division, where the former title challenger and the number 13 ranked Karolina Kowalkiewicz, who was on a 4-fight win streak heading into this event, lost a unanimous decision to the unranked Yasmin Lucindo. And as a result, Yasmin took the 13 ranked spot away from Karolina, but Karolina did not go out of the rankings. She dipped back to the very last spot available at number 15 at 115 pounds. So with the individual cards and ranking movements broken down, we will get into the totals for both of the cards combined. We saw 26 fights with a dead even 50% finish rate and 50% decision rate. There were 13 decisions, 9 knockouts, and 4 submissions. The division that saw the most amount of fights through these two cards was the 155-pound lightweight division. There were 7 fights. In the division that saw the least amount of action, and in this instance, 0 action, was the women's bantamweight division, which that checks out if you've been following that division for the last couple of years. And even for the lightweights having the most amount, that checks out as well. So 7 for lightweight, 0 for women's bantamweight, 26 total fights between UFC Vegas 91 and UFC 301. Next, we will get into the UFC debutantes that made a huge impact and got victories in their first fight within the organization. Now, there were more debutantes than the 4 here that we are going to mention, but only 4 got victories, and 3 of them were finishes. We start at UFC Vegas 91, where Chris Padilla finished another debutant, James Lallentop, a Dana White Contender Series alum. He did that 4 minutes and 33 seconds in to the first round via submission. And on that same card, in the heavyweight division, Jhonata Diniz finished Austin Lane via knockout 2 minutes and 12 seconds into the second round. And at UFC 301, we saw Dione Barbosa defeat Erneste Correct. Should I even try with that last name? Another Dana White Contender Series debutanto in Ernesta, and as was Barbosa. Someone that was a debutant had to get a victory in this fight, and Dione was that lady. She got a unanimous decision victory, and Mauricio Ruffy, who I talked about in the recap, one of the best UFC debuts in quite some time, maybe the best UFC debut ever for a Contender Series alum. He knocked out Jamie Mullarkey. That is a big-time debut spot. He finishes him in the first round, 4 minutes and 42 seconds in with a TKO. Out of those 4 names, you have to watch out for Mauricio Ruffy the most if we're going off of first impressions. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, every single one of these videos, I want to take a look at the total pound-for-pound rankings for both the men and the women before we finish up each discussion. We will start with the men. The current pound-for-pound king is Islam Makhachev. Now, another name that we mentioned, I'm not going to go through every single one of these, all 15. You're going to see it on screen, but I want to mention the number 1 and number 15, as well as anybody in the in-between who competed on the cards that we discuss here. So Islam is the number 1 ranked pound-for-pound fighter in the world. He, of course, is defending his championship next month, June 1st, against Dustin Poirier. The man who rounds out the top 15 is former bantamweight champion and now top 10 ranked featherweight, Aljamain Sterling. And then throughout the rest of this card, other names to mention is right there, the number 10 ranked Alexandre Pantoja, the flyweight champion of the world, beat Steve Erceg at 301, defended his title for the second time, and he is number 10 in the world, pound for pound. And then for the women's pound for pound rankings, there was no one in the top 15 that competed on these last two cards, so we won't go in depth on anything or how they got there. But the current best woman in the world, according to the rankings, is the flyweight champion Alexa Grasso, who is going to be coaching against Valentina Shevchenko on Tough 32 this year. I believe that airs in June. And rounding out the top 15, now there are some movements here. I don't know if these came following UFC 301 or if they came following UFC Vegas 91, but for what it's worth, it looks like Macy Barber climbed to the number 15 spot for the women. So it'll be fun to take a look at this every single episode and see how the pound for pound rankings change and how the individual division rankings change, not even every month, but week to week. That's going to be fun to track throughout this series. And to close it out, I just mentioned what will be in the next edition of the State of the UFC. That will come out in June following UFC 302. The goal is to try and have these air the Wednesday or Thursday following that pay-per-view card. So for the next one, it will feature UFC St. Louis, which is currently the number 12 ranked Derek Lewis versus the number 15 ranked Rodrigo Nascimento in the heavyweight division. Week after that, UFC Vegas 92, the number 11 ranked featherweight Edson Barboza is welcoming the unranked Lerone Murphy to the top 15 for his chance to crack in. And then there's a week off after that, and then UFC 302, June 1st, the pound for pound king of the UFC and lightweight champion Islam Makhachev will take on the number 4 ranked Dustin Poirier in what will be the third and probably last time Poirier gets a shot to become undisputed champion. So let me know if you guys enjoyed this quick video and if you're looking forward to what this series encompasses. Be sure to let me know in the comments below if there's any other details you would like me to mention. As I say, this is new, so I can throw in more details. I've done a series like this similar before with writing for Overtime Heroics back in the day, where I really went in depth on the finishes and whatnot. So if you want something even more in depth, be sure to let me know. I can give that a look in the comments. But anything, any tweaks or concerns, comments, etc. that you want to see in this series, be sure to let me know. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you do, please be sure to drop a like on the channel or on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Alongside these monthly video series, I'm open to expanding to more content ideas. If there's something out there that you don't already see in the MMA space, I would love to break down some stuff on that topic. I also break down and preview every single weekend the biggest fights. I recap every weekend the most meaningful results, and I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can join the community on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at the BAJ MMA. And if you like long form podcast episodes, I release those every Friday and Monday. You can follow and rate the show on Spotify, Apple, and many, many more. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video.